It is great to have back on the program Senator Ruben Gallego, or as we say in Argentina, Gallego, which is a less traditional pronunciation. Senator, it's so great to have you on. I want to talk about the rule of law. I want to talk about habeas corpus, but maybe we could start a little bit with immigration because it's been such a topic and you're working so actively on it. Do you think there's an area in which Democrats in general are not striking the right tone on immigration insofar as connecting with voters, where the Democratic Party could be doing better?
Yeah, so I think your basic Democratic voter is actually more in line with your average American voter when it comes to immigration. But the one area that we don't actually talk about is border security. And if you talk to kind of your non-political Democrat, which they exist, they will tell you like, oh yeah, I really think we should have good border security, where we're trying to limit the amount as close to zero as possible, the amount of illegal entries, right? And if you talk to most Americans, they all agree with that. Where there's a disagreement is that we also believe that we need to fix the problem of people that have been here for many years in the shadows. And this is where we're actually more in line with where the American public is, because our position is, listen, if you are a dreamer, you should be a citizen. If you're the spouse of an American citizen, you should have an opportunity to become a citizen. If you're here, maybe we should came here illegally, you should pay a fine and then give you a visa or a work permit, and so that way you're not deportable, but largely yet because you have such a presence in your community within your families. And if you look at where the Republicans are, they're trusted on border security, but they're not trusted on the immigration reform side, right? So what Democrats need to do is really capture the whole narrative and win the issue by making sure people understand we are just as good when it comes to border security as Republicans, but our position when it comes to actual humans and those that are stuck here in the shadows is more in line with what common sense Americans want.
I want to talk a little bit about asylum and the asylum process. The current president, I genuinely think, is confused between requesting asylum and insane asylums, also
Correct.
psychiatric facilities. For people who understand what we're talking about when we talk about asylum in the sense of people come to the border or are in the United States, right, do you think it should be easier or more difficult to qualify for asylum based on who we say should fit versus should not fit those claims?
So it's two things. Number one, I do think we need to change it to make it more difficult, because what we saw, and especially in Arizona, is that people were abusing the system to be able to come here, ask for asylum, and then because of our broken system, they're here for 7 to 9 years before they even have an asylum case. And that's actually what encourages a lot of migration. And not just, by the way, the stereotype is just from, Mexico and Latin America. Now it's from all over the world.
Yeah.
And so you actually had tourist agencies in foreign countries that were advertising to get to the United States and explaining to these refugees how to basically abuse our system. So some of it is to make it more, to tighten it up, so people that are in fear and danger of their lives have an opportunity to be to request asylum. Make it easier for people to request asylum in other ways besides going to the borders, because when that happens, it is very chaotic. You've seen what it actually looks like on TV. It's also very, very disturbing to the local economies in these border areas. So, this is what you have to kind of think about when we're thinking about that. And so what does a good asylum system look like? You should be able to request for asylum in third-party countries. You should be able to request asylum online. We should have more asylum judges that could actually be more helpful in terms of making decisions faster. Now, the other thing I think that's very key, and I could get a little nerdy this, the reason why we also had an explosion in asylum seekers is because our actual worker visa program system is screwed up. Right. And so when we could potentially be bringing in legally a lot of these workers, where they would probably pay a fee to come work this country, go through a background check, work for a couple of years, and things of that nature, instead of going through that route, they're going to the asylum route, because that is the only route. There is no guest worker program that can really meet the demand of what our economy needs. And so if you actually have a good guest worker program with a more sane asylum process, you'd see a lot of less people actually using that system.
It seems that there's a lot of inherent contradictions in some of what we're hearing right now on a lot of these issues. As you point out, when it comes to asylum and workers, et cetera, when we hear this, let's bring manufacturing back to the United
Right.
States. And the reality is there's 500,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs right
Yeah.
now in the United States. What are these contradictions things that
Yes.
privately your Republican colleagues will kind of acknowledge to you, or is it not something that they seem to be aware of?
Certainly some of them do, but who cares if they acknowledge it privately or not? It means like, what are you doing if you're not putting pen to paper?
Yeah.
But that is a real thing. This president is trying to bring manufacturing back by raising tariffs on countries that are sending us their goods. Even if we bring those jobs back, we'd have to import a lot of the workers from the countries that we just cut probably tariff deals with, because fact is, like, we don't have that manpower. If you look back during the campaign, we heard about these Haitian refugees and asylum, Haitian residents at this point,
Yep.
that had moved to Ohio. That's where, remember when they were eating the dogs and cats, supposedly, or that's the
Yes.
lie that the president said. The reason they had moved to Hamilton, Ohio is because manufacturing had picked up and the local economy and the local labor force was not able to meet that demand. And so a lot of Haitians had heard from both recruiters and even their families that, like, they could move to, I think it's called Hamilton, Ohio, start a job, live a good decent life in a very nice, safe part of the state, and that there was demand for their work because the local workforce was not meeting the demand. So that is going to happen on a national level, and in some regards, that's not a bad thing. That's how you grow the economy. Right? If you want to talk about the future workforce, Americans just aren't having enough kids, right? So there's a lot of things we could do to help that. But in the short term, bringing in good qualified labor in certain sectors to make sure we don't undercut our U.S. labor could actually be very beneficial for this economy to grow.
If we zoom out a little bit and think about what happened in November 24 in general, and now looking at the midterms of 26 and further down the line in 28, there are two conflicting views to a degree in the political left. There's the view that trying to appease swing voters with watered down Republican light policies didn't work in 24, it's going to fail again. On the other hand, there's the view that the perception of the Democratic Party was too left, too woke, too progressive, sort of whatever.
Touch, I would say, more than anything else.
Or out of touch. Well, let me frame up the question as it pertains to you, because some folks wrote to me and they said, David, when Senator Gallego was on the show as congressman versus the way we see him operating now, voted for 10 of Trump's cabinet picks more than his colleagues in the Democratic Party, talking about making it a little harder to qualify for asylum. Is he making the mistake, maybe a former Senator Sinema, of drifting to the middle in a way that doesn't serve the party? Give us your assessment kind of where you are and where the party should be.
Well, there's a lot of difference between me and so number one, like, I actually literally have town halls once a month. I'm not hiding from my constituents.
That's a key difference.
Party. Yeah. So when I'm out there, like when I'm out there and I put myself out there and you see me take these votes, like, I hold myself accountable. And like, I think you have to look at it in a couple of ways. Number one, when people are saying, like, oh, you voted separately from all these other Democrats, in Arizona, it's not the same as an East Coast or a lot of West Coast states. Let me give you a good example. Actually, before we got on, we were talking about the Navajo Nation, right? I was just in Pennsylvania a couple of days ago. 2% of the Pennsylvania land is owned and governed by the federal government. They have zero federally recognized tribes. Arizona has 22 federally recognized tribes, and 65 of our land is federal land. We're entirely dependent on the federal government making decisions about water coming down the Colorado River and what's going to happen to us in the future. In addition to, if you are, someone who cares about, minority communities, especially tribal nations, you need to make sure you have good relationships with the federal government for them, because if you don't have a responsive federal government, you'll see bad things happen on these tribal lands. So if you see a lot of what I vote for is because I need to take care of these very core Arizona issues. So if you're, a congressman from a New England state, you could really care less who the Secretary of the Interior is, because you will never call that person. I need to call the Department of Interior to help, one of these tribal nations out to make sure that we're getting our water from the Colorado River. And so, yes, I have an answer to the Democratic Party, but first I have to answer to who voted for me, which is the citizens of Arizona. Secondly, we also have to recognize as Democrats that things change. What has happened at the border is entirely different what happened 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. The migrations that came are totally different. And when we as Democrats don't look like we understand that things have changed and we're going to try to find solutions, we look like we're out of touch, right? So the asylum seekers that have been coming here for the last 4 years are entirely different than the asylum seekers that was designed under the current law, right? If we can't, as a party, admit that millions of people coming to the border, shutting down ports of entries, which causes a lot of business to decline on the border, which is they're entirely dependent on that type of business. And just the views of hundreds of thousands of people irregularly coming to the United States is going to impact us. Now, we could deny it to ourselves and we could just keep doing the same thing over and over again and then surprise we keep on losing some of these states, or we could understand that, there's a better way to do this. The American public and even the main baseline Democrat agrees that this needs to be done. And at the end of the day, we could actually win races. Or if not, we're going to be stuck in the same situation. And, there's a reason why I won Arizona and Trump won Arizona. We were both more in line with where the base voter was than the national party at that point. And I'll give you a good example.
Yeah.
Carrie Lake and I, when they polled us at the end, people trusted me more on border security and immigration issues than Carrie Lake, but they trusted Donald Trump more on border security issues than Kamala Harris. And why is that? Because Carrie Lake's position was so extreme that even Donald Trump wasn't taking those positions. So we have to figure out a way to make this something that we are trusted for, or else we're just going to keep losing elections. If you want to keep losing elections, we can, but that has consequences as we're seeing now.
When President Trump says, I'm doing so well on the border, crossings are down 99%, or he said, I think at one point he said 3 people cross, which seems like an implausible number. Number one, do you believe those numbers, or what numbers are you seeing? And number two, does Trump get credit for a reduction if indeed a reduction has taken place?
So I'm not sure like the 3, but the crossing is at an all-time low. It started though with Biden, and with Biden, by the way, when Biden tightened up the asylum restrictions and who can request asylum and quicker decisions,
yes,
we saw which everyone was very supportive of. All Democrats were very supportive when he did it. We saw those numbers started to dive quickly. The president came in and added more manpower at the border and continued it. So I think they both deserve credit. And I think illegal crossings are what we should try to minimize. Again, if you ask a normal American or just a normal Democrat, not one that goes to meetings, but someone that actually is just someone down the street and ask them, like, should we try to stop illegal immigrants from entering the country? The answer would likely be yes. Now, we could always have debate about how we do it. Here's the problem with where the president is doing it. Yep. He is bankrupting the whole system in the process of doing it. The DHS is spending and burning through money and then using it in a dumb way. They sent about 380 people to Guantanamo and had to bring most of them back, and that cost us alone $21 million, right? You're using the military to be on the border, which, number one, I think is just not what we as a country want to see. We want to see civilian policing. That's what we have always believed. So hiring more border patrol, and they're less expensive than the military. But you have these men and women at the border that are now not getting trained. They're not in their MOSs. They're not getting the technical trainings they're supposed to.
Right.
And again, it's all not sustainable in the long run if you keep doing it this way. So there is some credit to be given to the president. But this is not the way to do it because it's just not sustainable in the long run.
Senator, last thing I want to ask you about, I know you've got to run. On this issue of suspending habeas corpus, we've heard from Stephen Miller, advisor to the president, that this is something they are looking at on the basis that the immigration situation is an emergency and therefore it would be legally justified to suspend habeas corpus. Your colleague, Senator Barrasso, 3 times was asked over the weekend by Kirsten Welker, Uh, is that something that you think should happen? And he basically white flagged by saying, I don't believe it's going to come to a vote, which some legal experts said that's even more terrifying because
Correct.
it
Yeah.
suggests that it's not even actually going to go through the proper
Because you're
channels.
giving powers
It's
to one man. It's
exactly.
absolutely terrifying.
What are you
Yeah.
thinking on this? What is the Democratic Party and Senate Democrats thinking about this?
Well, so how could you think about this? How could you be bragging about having the lowest crossings ever and then say, well, we also now have to suspend, habeas corpus, right? So it's not an invasion if you actually have control of the borders.
Right.
And number two, we have to make sure this endangers everybody, everybody. You're giving the power to one person to be able to say whether you're in this country here illegally or not, or that you can just be accused of a crime and you're not going before a judge. Will be no warrants. This is a reason why, by the way, this was actually put in the Constitution of the United States, because we saw, our founding fathers saw the abuse of this occurring, during the time of the American Revolution. So it is very dangerous. We are not going to just take this lightly at all. I think we're hoping that there is a public announcement that's not going to happen. But when it happens, and should it happen, I think it's important that we are very much ready to, I think, do what we can to push back as hard as we can, both here on the Senate side, anything internally we're going to be doing, and we'll look at every possible scenario, but also people going to the streets and protesting and for, constitutional rights. And I think we have to be very clear that this has nothing to do with illegal immigrants. It has nothing to do with, whatever the president claiming is the threat. This has to do with protecting the Constitution of the United States and people's individual rights.
We've been speaking with Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego. Always a pleasure having you on. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Buenas, buenas.